I want to share this because there are going to be other parents, new parents that may already have children but haven't yet experienced this but will. So if you're watching this, I've been very vulnerable, but it's because it's important, I think, for other people to be really aware. Yesterday, my daughter, I picked her up from school, and she had been fine that morning when I dropped her off. So when I picked her up, she ran to me, and her eyes, the bottom of her eyes were just kind of red. And it looked like she had been crying. So she says, "Mommy, I was crying because I wasn't feeling good." And I looked at her and I said, "Okay." And then I said, "Well, we're gonna go home." So I grab her, I grab my other daughter, and we get in the car. And she says, "Mommy, I feel better now." And I said, "Okay, are you sure?" She said, "Yeah, I feel better." And I said, "Okay, well then we're gonna go to the store, and then we will go ahead and go home from there." So we go to the store, and we're walking around Publix, and I'm grabbing groceries, and here and there I'm looking at her, and I'm noticing that the bottom of her eyes are getting redder, almost as if she had been crying. But by this time, I don't know, it had been 45 minutes, maybe an hour since I had picked her up. So, I said, "Melanie, are you okay? Are you feeling okay?" And she started saying, "Well, I don't feel good. And I said, "Okay." So I checked her temperature. She was warm, but not fever warm. So I was like, "Okay, well, we're about to go home." So we're in the checkout line. I check her again. Nothing had really changed. And we walk outside. We put the groceries in. She's talking. She's talking to her sister. She's talking to me. I put her in the car, put her in her car seat. We live 5 minutes from the store. So as we're driving, 3 minutes of the drive, she's talking to me. And then she got quiet. I didn't think anything of it. Mind you, she sits right behind my seat because my youngest sits diagonal from me, so I can see her more easily. I pull into our apartments. I park. So I go to open my oldest daughter's side car door, and I open the door, and I notice that she's leaned over like this, her body's completely leaned over, and she is drooling from the mouth. If you know my child, she is a jokester, nonstop. So I'm thinking she's joking, trying to act like she's asleep. And I was like, "Melanie, get up, I gotta get the groceries." She doesn't move. Then I'm sitting there and I'm like, "Melanie, get up." And I start kind of shaking her just to kind of tell her I'm serious. And I start noticing she's doing these small little and just drool coming out of her mouth. I notice her eyes at this point. Sorry. Her eyes at this point, it was almost like they were rolled in the back of her head, but at the same time, like, you can just see like a glare over him, like she just was not there. And at that point I realized that she was serious, like this was real. So I start shaking her. I was like, Melanie. And I was just like, what in the absolute world happened in 3 minutes? She was talking to me, and then 2 minutes later, she's like this. So I grab her, and when I grab her, her body literally went limp. Like, and it caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting her. I wasn't expecting that. So luckily my husband had gotten off of work early. He was in the bathroom, and I had her in my arms, and I run into the house with her. So I was just in panic mode. And I'm screaming for my husband. I'm screaming for my husband. I was just like, Marcus, please get out the bathroom, come here now. And I hand him to her as he runs out the bathroom. He's still, trying to collect himself because he's so confused. And I said, she's seizing. I don't know what's happening. I'm gonna go get my phone. So I hand him to her. I run outside, grab my phone, and I'm standing there in front of my youngest's car seat. And I called 911. And I called 911, and my husband walks out. And as he's walking out, he just has her on her side, but holding her. And he just keeps talking to her in her ear. Breathe, Melanie. Breathe. Breathe, Melanie. I don't know if anyone has ever experienced just feeling or seeing the life just completely gone from your child. At that time, he's reminding her to breathe. I'm talking to 911 and I'm frantic. I was so out of my mind. They asked me my address and I was just like, my address. I could not focus on anything because at that moment, all I could think about were all the worst possible things. She choked on something in the car and I didn't know. It could have been a lot of stuff, but all I know is I was extremely, extremely, extremely scared. I think the most important thing at that time was the fact that my husband was so calm. He was so calm. I could see tears in his eyes because he was scared and I knew he was, but he was so calm in comparison to me. I'm legitimately running around frantic, screaming at 911, and the dispatcher could tell that I was frantic. She could tell I was panicking, so she told me to start counting my daughter's breaths. Every time she would breathe, she told me to tell her now, and that actually calmed me. So I understood she was both trying to calm me down, but also make sure that my daughter was breathing normally. So it took about 7 minutes for the fire department to get here first. They got here about 5 to 6 minutes before the ambulance. And, when the fire department got here, they were checking to see, does she have allergies? Did she eat something? They started looking at her legs and noticed that she had a lot of mosquito bites. We live in the South, so that's normal. She's always had mosquito bites. Legitimately daily. But by this time my husband is holding her here because she was finally starting to come to, but she still was not fully back to herself. So he's holding her here and I can see her face because I'm standing behind him, and her eyes are still just this haze. The fire department kind of lifted up her eyelids and they just kind of rolled back. The fluttering, it was just this constant. And at that point, I wasn't sure if she was still having the seizure. We've never experienced this before, ever. So they put her in the ambulance once they get here. And we realized that she has 104.7 temp. they instantly try to get her some fluids because they're concerned about her being dehydrated. She's 3 very small veins, and with her being dehydrated, her veins just weren't as prominent at that time, so she blew all 3 of the veins that they tried to get into her arm, but they were able to cool her down enough to get her stable and good to go in the ambulance. So we get to the hospital. I followed my husband because he was in the ambulance with her, and we find out that she has a febrile seizure. And finally we're able to get her fluids. That took a little bit, and then she was finally able to rest. But from the time it happened all the way through to the time the doctor came into that hospital, time was standing still. It was standing still. It felt like the longest experience of my life. But I can't explain how scary that was, because for one, I'd never really heard of them before, these seizures before. I also was not clear on how to handle a child that has had seizures. Thankfully, my husband was. And I want to just offer some, not education, because I don't know. I literally just learned about these yesterday, but more so awareness. Because now that I understand the fear that we both felt, the reality of my child truly not even being able to respond, and just seeing the life almost drain from her body. I don't want that for any parent. I truly don't. If you're aware, you at least have more options. You know how to handle it. What we did learn was the brain damage does not happen normally with febrile seizures. They're not as dangerous when it comes to a typical seizure, unless they are prolonged more than, I believe it was 15 minutes. And at that point, more testing should probably be done. But there's a likelihood that they can reoccur. It's just scary. It's scary. It's not a genetic disease, but there is a genetic predisposition. And because we have it in our family, and I just found this out yesterday, it's likely that either she can have them again, or even my youngest can have them, or any other further children that we have. Ask family if it's ever happened. It's not something I ever knew to even ask. If it has, just know that there's not much that you can do to stop them, but there's a lot you can do when they happen to make sure that your child is safe, to make sure that you're under control emotionally, much more under control than I was. And I don't think anything's ever going to change how scary those moments are. We did follow up with our pediatrician and had her kind of talk us through some things. She's very knowledgeable, so that really made me feel better. But she was more knowledgeable about the fear that came with it. Not just the facts of how to handle them, but the fear that a parent can feel when you are literally holding your child and she doesn't respond. That is the scariest. It is truly the scariest thing ever. The scariest thing. I'm a mother, so all you moms can understand. I right now at this point, I'm legitimately scared to leave my child, because one of the aspects of these are the rapidness of how quickly the fever comes on. And then from there, it's not necessarily whether it's a high fever or a low fever. It's just more so from what I'm understanding. And again, I'm still learning, so these are not absolute facts. These are just kind of the situation that happened with my child, due to how fast the fever came on for her and how high it got at that time is what really led to the seizure. Now, I've been told it can come with a low fever, so it's not necessarily the fact that it's a high fever that induces it. That's what scares me, because in 3 minutes between the time she was talking to me and the time I parked my car in front of my house, she was fine. She was fine. I checked her. She didn't feel warm. And then within that time, her fever was that high to the point where she started seizing. I just don't know. It makes me so scared to leave her alone. I wish I would have been more knowledgeable in that moment. And I just want to give another parent, I want to make another parent aware. A lot of you may have heard of these. I can honestly say I have not. And I certainly didn't know what to do when it happened. I hope this helps somebody.